Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the last session of the Extraordinary Technologies Conference, extraordinary research portion of this conference tonight. Tonight is my distinct and pleasure to introduce you to someone who embodies all of the characteristics of the great inventors, both fortunately and unfortunately. He's experimented in some of the most advanced technologies that we will ever experience. He has been suppressed by many forces, and his word has been, at every stage of the game, been tried to be stopped from getting out to the people that need it the most. He's been a staple here, kind of a tentpole feature for the Extraordinary Technology Conference. We owe a great deal to him, and all of the future technology in some way is going to be based off of his example. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like you to greet Paul Pantone.
Oh, am I? Oh, I'm on, okay. Thank you. I've been coming to these conferences for about 20 years. I've got to thank Steve Ellsworth for getting me started in this. It was back in about 1994. He invited me to go to a conference up in Denver, and he said they'd really like to see your technology there. So we went up to that conference, and I believe Steve has a copy of all those original tapes from the Global Science Congress back then. And we ran the engine that particular day inside on crude oil, and then we took it out in the parking lot and ran it on battery acid. There were a lot of naysayers, but we still have a few naysayers out there who either haven't built a GEET or they haven't talked to someone who has built a GEET. We've had only 2 people so far at this conference that came by the table saying, I don't believe that'll work. Well, we've been lucky enough to go on the George Norrie show and many other radio shows, and for many years my last wife and I did our own show on Worldwide Christian Broadcasting. And it was the Paul and Molly show every Sunday morning, 6 to 8 o'clock. We had a ball doing it. And after 800-900 radio shows, I'm kind of tired of doing radio shows. I'm tired of doing radio and TV interviews that never get aired. In the last year and a half that I've been here in New Mexico, we've had Discovery and History Channel come out to film us, never to put it on the air. So it doesn't surprise me the technology isn't out there further, because every time we do start to say something, we have to be very careful about what we say. 3 years ago, I had the pleasure of meeting a woman here, and she sent me a copy of the 1951 National Security Act, which I was not aware of, but it finally answered all those questions about where are all these inventors that keep disappearing. And it really surprised me when I read that article that she had sent me, and it's mind-boggling. The government says you're not allowed to have more than a 50% to 70% increase in mileage. You can't have a solar panel that's more than 20% efficient. All patents being applied for have to be approved by military first. If it doesn't get through all those hurdles, then you might get a patent. If you're above certain limits, they are to take care of the situation immediately. A lot of fellow inventors that I've known over the years ended up going to nut houses, jails, or just disappearing. In the last few months, I got a couple of calls from inventors that were trying to get out of the United States, and I said, the last thing you want to do is call me up and give me a phone number. All calls are monitored. And both guys, because they said where they were calling from, got picked up within 48 hours. So if you do try to get out of here, don't call me and tell me, please. If you go to the Cornell University website, you can see this 1951 National Security Act, and it's really interesting how they, let's see, how do we do this? I'm pushing the lower one. There we go. The 1951 National Security Act was written to protect us. It guarantees that you're not going to get good mileage, you're not going to reduce pollution to zero, and if you try to, we're going to stop you. So here in America, the only way we could find to get around that, and it works really well, we sell plans for anyone who wants to buy the plans, and on the plans, well, now I can't get it, there we go. On the plans, we walk you through how to put it on a small engine first. We explain how the rod works, how to test it. Now, some of the words we have in the plans may not fit properly, but they were the best words we had at the time. If my arm were the rod where the reactor sits, which is a small rod, you'd check it with a heat gun like this, and you'd run it up the center, and you'd try to find the center of where the hot spot is. Although this will show it's a hot spot, it's actually a cold spot. We have photographs showing ice forming on the engines in the middle of the exhaust pipe. Some where ice is formed on the tailpipe. We were not able to read all these things because there is no equipment yet that has been made to do the testing. So we've been at a standstill. For years, the only way to test the rod after it's been used is you take a compass and you hold it up next to it and you look for north and south. Then when you flip the rod over, you have to look for north and south again. If north is below the top, south is below the bottom, then the rod's too long. If north is way up here and south is way down here, then your rod's too short. All of these instructions are with the plans. But we had no way of reading it because it's not a magnetic field. It does not pick up even a staple, but it seems to attract a compass. Our dealer, Dan Easton, over in Europe, he's also representing Australia, he has now manufactured a new machine which reads the exact field of the rod. We can tell within 1 millimeter if it is long enough or too short, it's all there. It shows what plasma fields create around glass or steel rods. We have made these rods out of glass, aluminum, and other products that shouldn't hold magnetic fields, but they do, or at least a field that will attract a compass. We have built the units out of glass. We quit doing that because they get dropped, they get banged, and it upsets a lot of people because they think gasoline in the fuel tank, going through that chamber with hot going in one direction from the exhaust and the vapor going the opposite direction, and they see lightning bolts inside there. And mechanics and educated people run for the door. It's going to blow up. No, it isn't going to blow up. It's in a vacuum. Electricity moves in a straight line in a vacuum. Sound is canceled in a vacuum, so you can't hear the lightning bolts in there, but you can see them. There's a lot of phenomenon occurring. 181 that we've documented so far, and I'm trying to write a book now. That book should be able to explain in simple terms how each one of the phenomenon happen, why they happen, and how to test for it. It will lead many people, homeschoolers all the way to college level, to being able to do different tests at home and show yourself how it works and why it works so you can dial it in for your own use. As long as you know how it works and how to calibrate it, you can put it on any piece of equipment on the planet that uses fuel. That's a pretty wide, broad statement there. Doesn't matter if it's a jet, a boiler, a furnace. The problem we've had with some of the furnaces is the flame, if you try to create a flame like you would with propane or natural gas where it comes out of the burner sideways, you'll burn right through the chimney. Ours has to have an orifice pointed straight up because it swirls straight up the chimney. And when it's making a flame going up the chimney, it creates ice on the bottom of the chimney. And it also contains not only the ice field, but ambient temperature up to the rest of the chimney. So there is no heat from the chimney until you get 6 to 8 inches above the top, at which time you're going to find out you can't use all that heat. Most people don't need 800-900 degrees. It kind of roasts you out of your house, and this is one of the reasons why it has to be kept from your home. UL Laboratories has not approved it, nor do I ever plan on getting it approved by UL. I have not gone for any EPA approvals because EPA does not have the legal right by Congress to approve, certify, or endorse anything. That law was written years ago, and I found out about it when I got a hold of EPA back in 1994 and said, I do not want to volunteer for your program. I would like to opt out. Can I market this product without your interference? And one person after another from different departments of the EPA sent me back letters, including resumes saying, we're a voluntary organization and we have no legal authority to endorse, certify, or approve anything for aftermarket. A person has the right to modify their own car as long as you're not polluting more or getting worse mileage. But you cannot sell that car, you cannot transfer it, you can only do it for your own vehicle. The minute you try to do it for someone else's vehicle, now you may fall under other state and federal laws and licensing laws. But some of us, I think, should apply for the exemptions on that, because if attorneys don't have to have a business license, why should you and I? That's a different field completely. That's for somebody in the legal department. With GEET, we've used everything fuel-wise, from battery acid, salt water, pickle juice, Mountain Dew. And we've had a couple kids that even got in trouble down there in Palm Springs area. They had put it on their little engine for a class presentation. ABC was there. And let's see if we can zoom in on this one. These two little boys had no idea what they were getting into, but they built a GEET, and I walked them through how to do it. But I kept stressing, please use 20% gasoline in the fuel tank, always, minimum. When it came time for the judges to come around, they said no gasoline in the building. No public school is allowed to have gas. So the boys couldn't bring the gas in to start the engine up. But when ABC News got up there with their cameras and the news reporters in the local paper were there, well, pretend you're starting it, pull the rope. So the boys had already poured in Windex and pickle juice. No gas, sorry about that, not allowed to have that in school. So they pull the rope, and what happens? The engine starts. The two little boys are looking at each other going, it's running. Well, one of the little boys' dads realized there's something wrong with this picture. They didn't put gas in there. So he goes out in the hallway and calls me up and says, is it all right to run these engines without gasoline? I said, it's strongly recommended you use at least 20% gasoline. So at that point,
you know, that one year that we were at the UNM, we took that one demonstration model there. We made a mistake. We left it mounted on top of the trailer, strapped down. It got full of rainwater. In fact, the engine was full of rainwater. We figured we scrapped it. And we got to the hotel and we turned everything upside down, drained it out. Didn't realize the guy that was draining it also poured out most of the oil. And, but there was still a little bit of water left in the bubbler. And just for kicks and grins, you know, we were sitting there trying to pull it and make sure we didn't have any water in the cylinder. And it went off.
Yeah.
And it ran, and I mean, it took off loud. Everybody's, quick, shut it down, we're going to get in trouble. We were inside the hotel room. And, you know, and we didn't do anything else to it. We took it to the UNM, the 2007 Tesla Tech there. And how many of you were there at the 2007 Tesla Tech? You remember that evening that I was up on stage Friday evening, and we pulled it? Nothing else. In fact, I told everyone about the rainwater story, and it sat, we didn't realize it sat for 2 days with the rainwater in it, you know, and did it run good? Hey, so I may have a little bit of a clue that what he's saying might be correct.
well, these two little boys started it up. The dad from one of the boys out in the hallway calling me up, and he's a little bit nervous about it. He says, are the boys going to be in trouble? I said, not with me, but with the government. He said, well, ABC is putting it on the news. I said, well, for sure you'll be hearing from them in the next day or two. The boys had a dream. This was the second year they had won the science fair. They wanted to go back the following year and clean up Salton Sea, and they called me up and said, can you help us clean it up? I said, absolutely. How much salt do you want to remove? And they said, just 2 or 3%. I said, we can do it. But you got to build the unit because I don't want to be involved with your science project. I'll just tell you how to do it. They were told by the officials that showed up at their home a couple days later, they are not allowed to compete anymore in any competition for energy or environmental issues. The beauty of that is, you can't take that knowledge away from those boys. They know it runs. The number of people who have come out and tested GEET, we did a horsepower test in Salt Lake, and actually it was down in American Fork area, but we had to drive a 440 Ford down the freeway there, pulling 3,000 gallons of water at about 90 miles an hour. So we were speeding a little, I know. But we finally got down to this testing facility. They put it up on the dyno, and he shows me the chart of it. And I said, how can we have 0 horsepower at 100 miles an hour? He said, well, the computer says you have 0 horsepower. But how? I mean, we just came down the freeway pulling 3,000 gallons of water. He said, there's no power there. I said, wait a minute. Is your computer hooked up to the tailpipe reading oxygen? Well, yeah. So if it's reading 21% oxygen coming out the tailpipe, he said, oh, then you have no horsepower. So we found out the hard way that a lot of the equipment that's set up is set up for specific testing only. We have to come up with our own testing methods. Dr. Grant Wood and Dr. Richter, when they came to my home, they did their own testing. And the problem they had when Dr. Richter was there is we ended up getting more horsepower out of a 10 horsepower engine than it's supposed to put out. You're not supposed to be able to get 12,000 RPM out of an engine designed to go 3,600 RPM. And you don't get 28 horsepower out of a 10 horsepower engine, based on what they have in their books. But then again, you don't do wheelies in riding a lawnmower very often. But when you put GEET on and you decide you're not going to follow instructions, be very careful. You may end up with more than you wanted. If you ask for power and you're told how to get it, I'm going to tell you how to do it safely. If you choose to do it your own way, don't blame me. A lot of people say, well, I followed your instructions, and then they send me a picture of what they've done. Why is there Teflon tape all over the place when you need to use red RTV so it has a sealant? You can't do this, it has to be this way to work right. People still want to do it their way. Well, inventors have tinkeritis. I know, I'm an inventor. No matter what you hand me, I want to change it. So we got to be real careful when we're hiring people to build things for us, that they're not inventors. You got to hire somebody that just follows instructions. If this is what the instructions say, build just this. Please don't build it any other way. We have one gentleman working for us now that I asked him to build several of these units. I came back and his looked so much prettier than mine, but they're not functional. How can you check the rod? Well, you don't. Well, how can we do that? Well, you don't. Well, somebody's going to put something in that jar that doesn't work. And we warn people when they're buying this or when they're buying the plans, don't use used engine oil that has synthetic in it, because synthetics will not work in a GEET. Also, we tell them, do not use antifreeze. Antifreeze will cause a coating inside that chamber. It'll take longer to clean it out than it does to build a new one. People still do it. If you tell somebody not to do it, they're going to try it. One of my mechanics in Oklahoma, before we moved here to New Mexico, he was so lazy he didn't want to drive all the way down to the parts store and get some more red RTV when he ran out, so he used regular pipe dope. It's just on the lawnmower we use around the property, who cares? Well, he got out and started doing loop-de-loops in the front yard, which is about 5 acres of lawn. And about the third loop he was making, all of a sudden he sees these Black Hawk helicopters swooping in on him. He jumped off the lawnmower, left it running in the field, and he took off for the house. I said, what's wrong? He says, they got big guns. I said, well, you didn't use red RTV, did you? No, we ran out. I said, why didn't you go to the store and get some? I was taking a shortcut. I said, that's what happens when you take shortcuts. GEET vibrates at a frequency that will break down the fuel. If that rod is not spinning at the right specific frequency, it cannot atomically break down the fuel. And when it is breaking down the fuel, if you don't have the unit grounded back to the block of the engine, it transmits. And if it's on a little engine like this, it transmits the same frequency as a downed 737 or 747 transponder box. If it's on a 10 or 12 horsepower, they think it's a Black Hawk. So you definitely do not want to use Teflon tape. The reason we went to using red RTV is in 1983, all Permatex products and many other products were taken off the shelf and replaced with products that dissolve in alcohol. 2 weeks later, all you beautiful people out there that had cars that had carburetors, all the gas had alcohol in it. It would start breaking down and destroy your car. The problem is when they changed the formula, they also changed it for aviation quality. That means it's destroying the carburetors in airplanes. So how many planes have crashed because they were trying to stop you from using carburetors in a car? I'd have to guess some. Years ago, they used to have a lot of explosions in steam lines all around the United States. We used to read about them all the time. How many of you ever read about steam explosions back east where people were hurt in hospitals and things? Used to happen all the time. During one of the conferences, I was holding up the red RTV and I explained that would stop all those steam explosions. They're now using a red gunk product on all those joints and there's no more explosions. I haven't read about one in almost 20 years. There's a lot of things that can be done by talking about it on the radio shows, and other things bring you to a dead stop. So some things you have to just zip your lip and you cannot talk about it. If I want to show you how to run on something, first now I have to tell you, since I know about that law, the 1951 law says you can't do this. But scientifically, I can teach you in my classroom how to do this as a test to prove that the scientific principles are there. This is what the school's all been about, is teaching you what you can do. Then I warn you what you shouldn't do. Now some people leave the classroom thinking, well, I don't care, you haven't got the guts to do it, but I'm going to go do it. One after another, I've seen a lot of dealers that have bit the bullet on that one, where they've gone bankrupt, ended up in prison, lost everything they owned, because they don't listen. They think they are 10 foot tall and bulletproof. The government's bigger than you are. You can't win. And if they've got a rule against doing something, don't do it. If they've covered the table saying you can do everything on this table, but don't do anything on that table, and your first habit is to reach for the other table, you're going to get your hand slapped. We teach people common sense. You know, if you come to buy the plans, which are $350, we'll sell you the plans, and I'll walk you through any question you have. If you've got a computer, especially with Skype, you can call me up and hold the part up and say, hey, Paul, I built this. Is this the way this goes together? And I'll say yes or no. Change this. Move your finger down there. Change that one little part. I can walk you through every single detail, no matter where in the world you are, if you're willing to follow instructions. Anyone can build one. We've had kids at 10, 11 years old, 12 years old that ran on pickle juice. We've had girls, 12, 13 years old, one 15, came into class and they built the units one after another. Every one of them ran. Yet the older guys in class sitting there going, I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can do it. Well, the guys in the class were mechanics and guys trained that that's not possible. You got to block what you were taught in school out. If you want to learn how to build a gate, you've got to start out with a fresh mind, or at least an open, analytical one. Study each part of it. Maybe you'll come up with more discoveries than we have. Many people who've come to class have said, wait, you're saying this, but doesn't this mean this instead of what you're saying? Could it be that and I have to stand corrected on a lot of things, because for a while I was calling the field around this rod an aura. Well, the problem was, an aura, according to Science Book, is something you'll find around living tissue. This isn't living tissue. So I offended a lot of scientists. I didn't mean to, but when you hold it up to Kirlian photography, it has the most beautiful blue aura around it you've ever seen. So to satisfy scientists, I said, how about if we call it an auric effect? Okay, we can live with that. So we don't call it an aura, we call it an auric effect. It's an aura. Get mad at me, I don't care. The books are wrong. Plasma is the fourth state of matter. And although I've had this discussion with many scientists from around the world, I've got to say it again. The first three states of matter have the basic laws of thermodynamics. But when you look at the fourth state of matter, they become the flaws of thermodynamics. There are different rules in a vacuum and using plasma than there are with the first three. Some of the rules still apply, but in a vacuum, they completely flip. It's like looking in a mirror. So there are many things we have yet to learn. Whoever it is can wait. Sorry about that. I shouldn't have brought the phone in. Do I have any questions before I go on? Anyone who wants to ask a question, come up here to the front. There's a big X here on the ground. And we'll address them one at a time.
Please state your name and where you're from.
Ed Hemphill, Candy Lake, Texas, and I was late getting here. What is this law of 1951, please?
The law of 1951 is called the National Security Act. You'll find a copy of it if you go to cornelluniversity.edu. It's right up front. Easy to find. But it does limit everything from solar power. It goes into radiation. You cannot have transmitters. Anything that deals with transporting people in water cannot be patented unless it is approved by the Navy. Every different division of government is listed. But in 1971, the last time this was a public document, it was also voted on that after that year it would never be public knowledge again. It can't be a national secret if it's public. So now they're making new laws and they don't have to tell you what the new laws are. Now that's a secret. Any other questions? Oh, it's 28, the short version is 28 pages long. No one can apply for a patent without it being approved by all federal agencies prior to being accepted. So that means if you apply for a patent, copies of it just went out to everybody. No, they do it without your knowledge. So if you pretend you're filing for something, you send papers in, all of a sudden you're going to be getting calls from Westinghouse, GE, and everybody else that's not supposed to hear about it. Hey, how would you like to sell us your rights? What's secrecy? There's no secrecy, except against the public. No, copyrights are different rules. Those you have a lot more protection. The biggest difference between a copyright and a patent that I've seen so far, my material is copyrighted. I can sue you, and it's going to cost me 50 to 100 grand to sue you. And if I win, you can file bankruptcy and I don't get anything. Wow, what a way to win. If I call the FBI or Royal Canadian Mounted Police or Interpol and say, copyright infringement, here's my proof. They go in, kick your door in, steal everything you got. They get to keep all the profit. And you don't get anything except time in jail.
I was wondering, do the engines run longer on Ghee as opposed to gasoline?
The original engine that was given to me by Briggs & Stratton back in 1983, after putting almost 10,000 hours on it, was still running just as good as it was the day we got it. When we took it back to Briggs & Stratton, they said those engines are designed to run 600 to 800 hours. So we know that it got more than 10, and it's still runnable right now. We've had people saying they're getting 10 to 20 times their mileage. They never change the oil. In our car, we drove it 85,000 miles in 3 years, never changed the oil. And to show people that the engine didn't overheat, I took my knife and I stabbed the radiator hose. And never lost any antifreeze except 1 or 2 drops when I stabbed it. Problem is you don't have a heater. You got to buy electric heaters for your car.
All right, thank you.
I want to know what'll happen if you pull the spark plug off after you get it going.
If the rod you're using is the right length and the right diameter for the fuel, it will keep on running and running and running until you break the vacuum. If you cannot break the vacuum, it's going to keep running until it runs out of fuel.
Thank you.
No other questions, okay? We do have a demonstration. I wanted to keep it as short as I can. I think you guys have dinner planned on after this. Main thing is questions. I've been at this now for 36 years. We are only going to have 2 more classes here. We're having one starting Monday after this conference for people who are at this conference who have flown in or driven in that don't want to fly back out later. You can stay an extra 4 days. We're going to be at a different facility down the street, and the cost on that's going to be $2,250. We're only going to have 10 people in the class. We'll have another class on the 18th to the 22nd. We're only going to allow 15 people in that class, and then I am closing my doors to public education. I will only be training dealers that are buying licenses, because right now, most of the people that want to become involved with GEET are big corporations in foreign countries, because people here have not shown the support of wanting to come in. They don't have the funding to come in, so we're taking it abroad. I charge those people 10 grand to come in for class, and they're not having a problem with it. But here in America, we lowered the price to people in this group to the $22.50 to try to help people out. So any of you who are interested, see me afterwards at my booth, or you can go down and see Steve and Terry down at their booth. $250 from each person coming will be set aside to help Terry out with his medical expenses. We'd like to see him totally recovered here. Again, we do have flyers to tell you when and how to get a hold of me to sign up. If you do want to come to the class at our booth, come on by the booth. We're going to go ahead and run the engine now. If we can get the lights turned on. Okay. Jason. Yeah. And my son, Jason Pantone.
Let's have a warm welcome for Jason.
You'll notice the clouds of pollution pouring out and filling the room. Everybody needs to have a handkerchief to breathe through, right?
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Hey, haven't we done this before?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh, that's right.
It's a lot more fun, though, when you do it in a little tiny room where you're right on the bed and a maid walks in and says, "What is this?" "Oh, it's an engine."
We've actually done this in a room with COHC meters, CO meters, as far back as, 1997 or 96? 96, the International Symposium on New Energy. We ran it like 15, 20, or 25 minutes. It was a small room, smaller than one of these sections right here. There was 30-some-odd people. The oxygen content was higher than we started with when we shut the engine off. The doors were closed, the air conditioning was off. There's no hazard to the carbon monoxide or any problem
No,
like that.
sometimes there is. Right now, this rod is not set up for multiple fuels. It's set up for gasoline, and we're running multiple fuel in it. Now, this is the same engine we ran in Salt Lake just before they arrested me in 2005. And 3.5 years later, when I got out, I went back to the machine. The same Coke, sugar, and coffee was in there. I pulled the rope the first time, and it started.
Does this still have the rat pee in it?
The which?
Was this the one that had the rat pee in it?
No.
Okay.
No, it was one of the other ones.
Did I say that out loud?
Huh? Oh, don't worry about it. It rubs off.
When we did this at 1996 or 97 at the International Symposium on New Energy, the oxygen content in the room with an oxygen meter was higher, and there was 0 CO.
Yeah, we've had tests done in California and several other states with smog equipment where the oxygen level in the room goes up. No carbon monoxide, no carbon dioxide, no pollution, and 21.1 to 23% oxygen coming out the tailpipe. Yes?
Okay, if you'd like to engage in questions, come on down. It's new. This question is right for you. Give us your name and where you're from.
Frank, Midland, Texas. If it's putting out that much oxygen, why don't you keep running it during the conference and keep people awake?
Well, because we kind of snuck it in here, and usually hotels don't like you running engines in the building. But if you just carry it in and do it, it's, "Oh, I'm sorry, you didn't want us to do that?" Never ask permission. It'll take forever to get the no.
When did you go into business, and what was that like? How did you market it? I mean, how did just come into these
Oh,
conferences?
God, I went into
or-
business when I was 15 years old, raking leaves and then building things and oh, you mean this. 1983 is when I got the first one running. 1979 is when I first started building them, trying to see what is the best way of doing it. In the process of finding out what is the best way to build a GEET, we found out 350 ways not to build a GEET. But many of them did work if you were to be happy with a 10, 20, 30% increase in mileage. I wasn't. I wanted to know I could have zero pollution. Now, we have to backpedal. 33 years, so that we can make something legal for what the government says is legal. Come out with a 30, 40% increase, we can live with that. Okay.
Hi, Paul. Russ Grease here. Question for everyone in here that does not know what a GEET is. Can you explain the quick process of what's going on? That you understand. Just run through it quickly
Okay.
for those of us that don't understand.
We have a bubbler with 2 hoses hooked to it. The first hose goes all the way down to the bottom as a pipe. This bubbles in a bubbler. This is very inefficient, but it will work. Oh,
Sit that right there,
if it doesn't roll around, okay. A little
a
glare.
little bit, zoom out,
Okay.
and we can also turn on the light for the bottom here.
Okay.
Hey, can everybody see that?
Okay.
It's starting to come on lighter.
Okay. You've got a bubbler post all the way to the bottom. The air bubbles through with a vacuum valve at the top, so you can control the amount of vacuum in the bubbler. The engine itself, oh, okay.
Shucks, Mom.
Modern equipment. Ow! No. The air is pulled off the top of this. Right about here is the liquid level in the chamber. The vacuum pulls from the engine through that top little part, pulls it through a tube, and as it gets towards the engine, the exhaust pipe coming out goes the opposite direction of this rod. The pointed end of this rod is where the vapor from this jar comes in, hits it, is accelerated. This acts as an accelerator. It spins this rod at a high speed, causing an atomic breakdown. A particle of sulfur hitting here can break in half at this point. By the time it gets to this end, it becomes 32 particles of hydrogen. So as it moves through here, it is spinning and expanding. Once it gets through that chamber, you've got way too much fuel for what came through it. You have to add a little extra fresh air going into the intake of the engine so you get a good clean combustion with plenty of air. If you want to throttle up, you have to open the top valve on this as well as the air intake of the engine. You open both of them simultaneously. It acts just like a carburetor, and you can get all the speed you want. Now, if you are running one of these at full speed, you're going to find that you can achieve better than 3 to 4 times the normal RPM that the manufacturer says is even possible. It no longer sounds like an engine. And if you do closed loop, which means rerouting the exhaust back into the intake of the engine will be totally silent. You'll hear the piston moving up and down and the valves opening and closing, but you will not hear the normal sound of an engine. Go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name's Tim Conley from Vancouver, Washington. Has anybody put together an automated throttling system? You made me just think of it. So this could be throttled back and forth automatically, a linkage or something in any of the ones that were done around the world.
Yes, we're doing that right now in England and Australia. We're looking at doing it in Australia, and India and South Africa right now on some other equipment.
Are they commercially available?
No, not in the United States. In the United States, I was told if I start offering any components, I might be in deep trouble. So
What about other countries?
there we don't have a problem.
So it is available in other countries?
In other
as a
countries.
commercial
Yeah.
product?
This here, we built this here in town. This is a 225 kW generator. This one's being shipped out to Puerto Rico, in a couple weeks. And we have orders for these from all over the world that'll be getting filled out of India and Russia. We cannot build these in this country and be cost effective and compete with foreign countries. People here want way too much money. We can buy the same generator, instead of 225 kW, I can buy this in a 500 kW in India for $40,000. Here in America, it's 120. So we've priced ourselves out of competition by buying foreign products, having it assembled here, and letting the government add all these impounded taxes and everything else onto it. We put ourselves out of the marketplace. Right now, if you go online, go on any search engine, and type in cars that cannot be sold in America, it's going to blow your mind. There are so many cars right now, they get good mileage and have less pollution than we have in this country, but they cannot be sold in this country. It broke my heart the other day when Volkswagen said they can't even advertise their new car in this country because it's too good. I've been meeting inventors for years that have said they could go coast to coast on water, battery power, all these other things, and I have reason to believe a lot of them are true. But it's funny, they all seem to get arrested and get locked up, and SEC violations, you name it. These horrible things just keep happening. And when George Bush's people called me up and said, are you planning on marketing your device to run on water? I said, no, not unless you guys force it. Because if you hurt me, I release it for free. On 550 websites worldwide. So as long as you leave me alone, I leave you alone. And I'll play politically correct. I'll stay within the lines. I won't step on your toes. But I have no enemies. Oh, yes, I am willing to sell to Russia, Iran, India, Pakistan, anywhere in the world where they'd like to clean up their air and have clean air and better mileage. I'm more than willing to work with anyone. Any more questions? Good. Son, what did you put in the fuel tank?
That was Coke, ice cubes, really old gasoline, and that fresh gas.
Fun fuel.
Actually, there's a picture of both engines side by side that was taken the other day. It's hard to see because there's a reflective surface on it there.
Oh, you guys were out there. Go ahead.
Can you explain the science behind the plasma that forms?
The science behind it?
Or just how you think it works, and, just whatever, anything about it.
Oh, you would ask me that, and I don't have it handy, but I'll pull it up. It'll be right here. Okay. Let's see. Okay. If the rod is the right length, then you'll be broken down atomically by the time it gets to the north end of the rod. If the rod, like this one, is too long, it will start recombining the molecules and become heavier and heavier elements. Now, if the rod is way too long, you're going to end up with fibers shooting out the tailpipe that look like tire strands. So you don't want to put a light vapor with a long rod. If your molecule chain is very small, like water, it would be a very short rod. Crude oil is going to be 6 inches long if it's vertical, 12 inches if it's horizontal. If you put a 24-inch rod in there and you're running crude oil, you're going to end up with beautiful black little spidery webs hanging from everything. So you can recombine, because as it's going from the end to the center point, each time it gets to the next center point, it has doubled in mass and ripped in half. Each one of those points leaves a definite heat signature on the rod. And when the heat tests were done in Paris, in one of the universities there, they found that there was a definite line they could see with microscopes of heat discoloration. And at the very end of it, there were hundreds of these little lines right next to each other. Yes.
I'm David from Western Kansas, and we heard some of the other presenters talking about plasma-type effects, and obviously there's some interesting physics going on here. But what puzzles me is if you're getting down to hydrogen and then the engine is burning that, how do we get oxygen out of the exhaust?
Well, we haven't quite figured all of this out, but at BYU when they were testing it, we were running it on crude oil with 72 elements. What they had a problem with is how come we have helium coming out after the reactor when there was no helium in the first unit, the bubbler, and why would there be 24% oxygen after the reaction pipe when there was only 18% in the bubbler? There were a lot of things that didn't add up. They were really complex over the fact that there was a new element that was showing up on their computer with an atomic weight 2.4. And once it went through the combustion chamber, everything came out different again. It was nice, clean, fresh air, and there was an abundance of nitrogen that wasn't present prior to the engine. So there's atomic restructuring going on from heat, combustion, pressure that we don't understand.
Thank you.
And if you're a PhD in that field, we need help. We'd like to understand it better. Yes?
George Hale, Florida.
Okay.
You know Vernon Roth?
Hmm?
Vernon Roth, you
Yeah.
know him?
Yeah, I hope so. The great big guy, yeah.
Would you start working with that guy? I want to see this thing spit gold, silver, little titanium. I mean, we want something here besides a big carburetor.
Yeah. Okay. John, we may not be needing cameras for that one. I don't think we're going to be able to show all that. Yeah.
Hi, Max Rice from Albuquerque. Could you talk a little bit more about inserting the exhaust back into the bubbler and not the carburetor?
We don't put exhaust gas back in the bubbler. You want to put that into a chamber, and then part of it's fed into the bubbler where it goes in, and part of it goes into the air intake at the top of the engine. And by doing that, you cancel all sound. There is no sound in a vacuum. So if you can keep the exhaust in a vacuum, there's no sound. But the problem with that model is it can only be done on this. It cannot be done on a car, a generator, or anything else because the minimum efficiency is 8 times normal, making it a little illegal. Yeah. And here in the United States, we can't do that yet. Any more questions?
Yes, Paul, I have one.
Keep it simple.
Okay. How do you know? The diesel, can you explain for those diesel fans in the crowd why they just can't put a straight GEET on diesel?
Well, we had a gentleman who put it on his diesel truck, and he got in a little trouble. You can't put anything on a commercial vehicle unless it has been government approved because it is a commercial vehicle and licensed for commercial hauling. Another gentleman up in Chicago put it on his truck and went from 6 miles to the gallon to over 18. IRS audited him, and they wanted him to pay back all that money he didn't pay for those extra miles per gallon because he had an unapproved device on his truck. Over $58,000 worth. So the government has leaned on this very hard, but February of this year, our great President Obama signed an executive order, the first one I think he's ever signed that helps anybody that I know of, and it says we must reduce pollution on every semi, every big rig in this country by 25 to 30% over the next 2 years or you're going to pay a penalty. But he didn't say you had to have an EPA-approved item. So it looks like we may have a small doorway open here. And we have a few companies right now that would like to take advantage of that. We're not going into who they are, but they've already approached us saying, can we get that 25 to 30% margin with just a partial GEET? Yes, you can. We've been testing it in Canada, US, and Europe, and we have successfully made a couple of very inexpensive models that will be able to fit semis all day long, and they'll be able to save $15,000 to $20,000 a year per rig. And give them their 25 to 30% increase in mileage. And it will be politically correct, but it still will not be legal to put on your car. So we want to be a jump ahead of the government on that one, so we're not going to install it on your truck. We're going to bring you into a classroom and hand you the tools and say, here's how you put it on, go out and do it yourself. And we'll have qualified people watching. So you'll be in for training on how to put it on your own truck so that if you ever have to repair it, you can.
Oh, that's
there's nothing to wear out.
Because if it's their vehicle, that's the one in that they have.
Yep. Yeah. So we are looking at that. In other countries, they are very eager to do it. Right now, we're getting a better reception in Europe than anywhere else in the world. In 2 weeks, we're going to be running a 1 megawatt power plant in the Netherlands at a concert. After the concert, it will be getting a lot of publicity. We're not telling anybody where the concert is or anything else. It's just a concert there. We're looking at doing several other concerts and other major events in the world. Very quietly, we're just installing it, powering the units, and then talking about it later.
Hello, Paul Pantone.
Hello.
David Puckta, San Diego, California. You briefly went over this. Are you seeing any different magnetic signatures on the metal or the different rods? Could you explain that?
The what?
Any magnetic signatures that are different on the rods and on the metals? I know it's rhetorical.
Okay. This particular rod has a north up and a south down. When you turn it upside down, north will always be up, south will always be down. But this will actually show that?
Just hold the see them.
Oh, okay. Can you read the, no, you can't. It has to be standing straight up to be able to read the north and south.
Try the flashlight here.
Okay.
Hold it down as close as you can there.
The point is north, south. When we turn the rod over, we have north up, south down. No matter how many times you flip the rod over, north will always be up like a human being. It is not a magnetic field. It is an electromagnetic gravitational field that's the same that you and I have.
Right.
And around our body. That'll do.
So what you're saying is you're seeing a gravitational change in the metal, not necessarily a magnetic change in the metal.
A combination, but one that cannot be identified by any other normal explanation of magnetic field, other than it can draw a compass needle. It does not have any other magnetic qualities.
Correct. It could be, what you're saying is it's magnetic through the magnetic field. You can't pick up iron filings with it.
Correct.
Can you stick two of them together of
No.
the same metal? Okay.
No.
Have you ever magnetized any other materials besides
Glass,
metal?
aluminum, many different things.
Right. So let's talk about glass. What have
Okay.
you done for the glass?
Well, glass has the exact same field. When it's used and it's the right size, it will have a north and a south. When you turn it upside down, north will always be up. The other phenomenon, which we have not been able to explain yet, we had a gentleman who was a double amputee, and his legs were hurting him really bad this one day, so he took one of the rods while he was at our booth talking, and he was rubbing his stump. And after about 20 minutes, he says, "My Lord, I don't believe it." I said, "What?" He says, "My foot that isn't there doesn't hurt." I said, "What?" He says, "I've had phantom pains ever since my legs were cut off." I said, use it on the other foot. Well, he did. He came back saying it worked. I said, well, that's interesting. We have a lot more research to do here.
All right, then I have a question for you. And you can agree or disagree or dialogue, but if everything has hydrogen in it, then potentially you've changed the hydrogen signature, the signature that holds the gravitational secret.
Yes. I believe gravity is controlled by hydrogen and its signature, the electrical field around it. By modifying it and condensing it, you're going to make a product that can be heavier and denser. You can go all the way to the point of carbon or diamond or whatever, but if you were to take GEET and you put something solid into it and you're getting out or liquids, and it keeps making it lighter and lighter to hydrogen, what is the next step up? Plasma.
Right.
What comes out of the plasma is a pure burning hydrogen.
Okay, so you jumped over a subject that was really over everybody's head, making elements lighter and heavier. I'll go on record here and say I'll validate that with you, because that's truly what can happen. When you're in a gravitational field, you can make elements lighter and you can make elements heavier of the exact same element.
Yeah. Well, we've also, when we're playing with the glass, we've noticed a discoloration in the glass. The electromagnetic gravitational field that's created inside the center of the unit at a high speed will turn it a gold color. And when you pull the rod out after being used for even 4 or 5 hours, it looks like it's 24 karat gold plated.
Correct.
And when you break it, every little piece of it looks like it's gold.
Well, remember something, that there's the gold color and then there's gold and there's everything else. Just the most simplest thing to understand is that chromium, which is in all of these stainless steel and fuel cells, when it oxidizes with oxygen, it turns to pyrite. That's how we get pyrite. So there's a lot of combinations between those two.
Well, during one of the tests, which we are not telling people how to do for safety reasons, when we pulled the rod out of the unit, it was a 12-inch rod, and I dropped it on the table from about 10 inches. One end of it turned to powder. The other end of it turned into a little piece of rubber. You could literally take a half-inch piece of steel rod, tie it in a knot, and bounce it.
Okay.
I was very upset. It wrecked my rod, and I threw it. It landed out in the pond.
So John Hutchison is playing with radio frequencies in a heterodyne resonance,
Yep.
hitting metallic structures that no longer are metallic structures.
Yep.
He's hitting an anti-gravitational, making yogurt float to the roof. And if you're at a gravitational sound wave attenuating the hydrogen atom, then there's some common ground there.
Yes. A lot of us inventors have common ground. The problem I see with inventors, and there's many of them here and at all the other shows that you can go to, is they say, I'm tapping into the ether field, I'm tapping into the... You can't, everybody can't be tapping into the same thing. We have to be able to isolate a little bit better what we're doing, chart them out better. This is what I'm trying to do in a book form in the next year, is document everything we've done and see if we can come up with a proper name for it. If you look through my training manual, it keeps saying unidentified field of energy. Some people call it a Gauss field. Some people call it something else. We're not sure what the heck it is. So maybe with your help and 20, 30 other inventors and 100 other scientists, maybe we can actually get together and come to some solid.
I think you're right. You take the definitions of all the laymen that don't have anybody to go after the definition, you just compile them, make one good definition, and call it what it is, and try to back as much as you can with physics.
Yeah.
And then things that are anomalies, we give them new names.
Yeah. There's too many people that will look at something if you're mislabeling it, and you lose all credibility. Maybe this isn't plasma. Maybe we found something beyond plasma. But at the time I built the first plasma generator, I didn't know they were having the first plasma generator meeting in Russia. It was in June of 1983. And here I've got the thing running. I didn't know it was called plasma. People asked me what it was. I said, hell, it's an engine. You put the fuel in here, pull the rope, and it runs. Do I need to know more than that? Well, yeah, to get a patent, you got to know what it does, how it does it, and why it does it. But then you got all these scientists that are saying, well, that can't be done. That can't. Carbon in, carbon out. Bull. Carbon in, carbon out is a way outdated statement.
This is true.
That's like saying the world is flat. And if you want to believe it is, go look it up in the encyclopedia. You're right, it's flat. Do you have any more questions?
You know what? Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thanks.
I was in the electronic business, and we dealt a lot with the cable companies. And they put a little thing that looked about as big around as a piece of toilet paper spool that's empty. And it had little threads on both ends, and we'd tell our customers, for God's sakes, don't put it in the oven and bake it at 400 degrees for 30 minutes because it ruins it completely. Can we take that same kind of an approach to your engine? And one of the things you said a while ago, I want to make sure I heard you right, it made helium?
Yes.
Helium is the byproduct of radioactive decay, sir.
Really?
Yes.
Would that be why they can hold X-ray film up next to it and get an MRI?
Probably. Thank you very much.
They're coming out of the machine. Going into the machine, you get an X-ray.
Well, but helium is.
Yeah.
Hi, Paul. I'm Bill from Florida.
Okay.
Could you go into a little bit about your experience with the direction of spin on the rod and the
Spin on every single aspect of GEET is always clockwise into the vacuum.
into the vacuum?
Into
And
the vacuum.
is
It's being
going to
pulled to the engine, it's spinning this way, clockwise. If it's coming out of the engine, it's spinning the opposite direction, clockwise, going the opposite direction.
No, don't confuse me with going in and out of the engine. It only goes into the engine from the rod, correct?
No, right, but the exhaust coming out of the engine, which goes around the intake coming in,
Spin the other way?
is spinning the other way. So all of it is opposing but always in a clockwise direction.
Okay, so, and the vacuum is created by the engine, so into the vacuum is going into the tube,
Right.
and coming out is just the opposite. And it's clockwise going in.
Mm-hmm.
Keep it straight.
Actually, it's always clockwise into the lower pressure, so,
Oh,
thank you.
okay.
It's always clockwise in
Oh, we
lower
got one
pressure.
more question, and I think we have people ready to go.
Yeah, I think we're just about, we're
Yeah.
getting close to time. But Paul, are you making claims that there's any energy from the ether here?
Oh, you want to talk about ether, you bring a doctor in. He's got a bottle of ether back there.
Just
Go ahead.
this is just a really quick question. You brought up a good point. You said clockwise in, clockwise out.
Yep,
Have you ever tested that on the lower hemisphere of the Earth?
yes,
Still the same?
same.
Thank you.
Thank you all for being here. It was a lot of fun.
Ladies and gentlemen, Paul Pantone and GEET. Thank you, Paul.
You got it.